Matters group here at APC. I'm going to let Mary Beth Drew kind of intro our guest teacher for today in just a moment. But I would love to just open us with a word of prayer and kind of get us centered here in this space as we prepare to learn and grow together. So would you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for this morning. Thank you for time to come together at church, to worship together, to turn our attention toward you and to listen to what your Holy Spirit might have for us this morning. Thank you for this space now, for the education that's happening across the demographics in this hour for our children, for our youth, for our young adults, and our adults alike. Lord, would you meet us now by your Holy Spirit? Lord, the mental health crisis in this country is such a big problem. We long to be a part of the solution, to be your hands and feet to hurting people. So over the next few weeks as we learn, would you help us to be equipped, to be your presence, Jesus, in a hurting world? Thank you. Thank you for this team. Would you bless them in their work and bless them as they teach us? It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, I'm going to hand around attendance, and I will invite up Mary Beth.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to start moving along. I want to give as much time as I can to Janet, our special guest. But I did want to just remind everyone the Mental Health Matters team and where we are currently, because we hear it off and on, and we're not probably all sure what's happening. Just a reminder, on our team is Allison Young, myself, Deb O'Hare, Marla Golden, Stephanie McMahon, and Lisa Newman. So if you know any of those and have any questions, always feel free to ask any of us, or Lindsay as well can feed it. We have a commitment to learning and growing deeper in the areas of wellness and challenges that we're currently in. We're also, by doing that, we're going to have guest speakers like Janet today and upcoming for next week as well, to teach us and make us more aware of what's actually happening out there so we can be the hands and feet. We are also providing and beginning programs and activities for you all to participate in and connect together, and one of those is APC Game Night. So let me just have Allison explain what that is, if you're interested in attending.
Good morning, everybody. We came up with this idea to offer a game night, not to add yet another thing to busy schedules, but thinking about people who might actually be looking for something to do, a way to connect. So if that applies to you or somebody you know, please pass the word along. We're hoping to do this monthly. It'll be in Crossroads. We just want people to show up, bring a game, or play a game that we'll supply. And I'm going to bring a special guest when we meet on the 11th. So, wonder what that would be.
Roof, roof, roof. Just suggesting. All right, so let me, just a little introduction of our spiritual connection to mental health. And I just want to go through a passage. We learned a Greek word back in the spring with Lindsay called koinonia. Did I say that right? Koinonia? Okay. Sorry, I had to get a refresher on this. And this is what I found as a translation: fellowship, sharing, participation, or contribution. But what struck me more importantly as I started to learn a bit deeper, remind myself, was the importance and the application of it. Because if we just are based in knowledge and we don't apply, then I'm not sure if we're actually being the hands and feet of Jesus. So the importance was it's non-optional environment for spiritual growth. To me, that was pretty startling in understanding the importance. And the application, there's a number of ways, including serving other Christians, loving one another, and coming alongside someone to offer assistance. So the bells are going off in my head just simply in those applications of coming alongside, and that's the message of Jesus Christ in the Gospels. I pulled up a scripture from Philippians, and it's a letter written from Paul while he was in prison to those in Philippi. So I don't think his situation was hunky-dory. I think he was probably physically not in his strongest suit, but he's addressing more the emotional component and mental component, as I see it, of what wellness, healing, hope, faith can help encourage those who are not necessarily feeling emotionally strong. Let me read Philippians 2, verses 1 through 4. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others. So, as I'm reading this, I'm seeing the koinonia, sharing a community, what that might look like. Our Mental Health Matters teams very much try to follow these words and these concepts of encouragement. They're not remedies, they're not fix-its, but we want to walk alongside those that we know are suffering, or those who just need like a game night for wellness. I wanted to get you on board of why our committees work and our desires. We believe Jesus was very much interested in individuals' mental health in the Gospels. He spoke to and felt empathy for those marginalized or separated. Woman at the well. He wept alongside Lazarus' friends at the grave. He also gives us insight through his parables to teach us healthy responses such as compassion, as in the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son. And he created himself emotional support systems, his 3 closest disciples when he needed. And those are all necessary for all of us and as a community to grow and thrive. Suffering is not going to be an if, but the preparation is key to our response to the when. Taking that concept of Paul's koinonia while he's in prison, mental health matters. We're hoping to assist those who are moving away in that isolation to a place of connections with fellow followers of Jesus. So let me circle back to the importance of application of koinonia with the Mental Health Matters team. Serving other Christians, loving one another, and coming alongside someone to offer assistance. I invite you to join us, to support one another, but to become more educated and aware of the suffering that's all around us, and not as a bring me down time, but lifting people up with encouragement. Our team has a prayerful support system of compassion, but our desire is to equip anyone with the necessary tools and resources as we walk this journey with individuals and as a healthy community of support. And quite humbly, we are just toddlers in this responsibility. We're just, it's a big area, and we're just starting out. So we ask for your prayers of support and encouragement as well. And with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Janet. This is Janet Haag, the Executive Director of NAMI and Mercer County. She has done in her
That's good. Colleague, a friend. The reality is that everybody knows somebody, right? Like mental health, particularly in this post-COVID world, we all know that a lot of people have been struggling with their mental health. And whereas I think in the past we kind of put that to the back, you know, kind of pretended like that wasn't an issue, or somebody was just kind of acting strange or weird or whatever, like we just didn't really address it so much. But fortunately, what COVID taught us all was that our mental health is very fragile and that we all need to be paying attention to that and doing whatever we can to try to help and support one another on that part of our journey. So how many of you are familiar with NAMI? Okay. What NAMI stands for is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And it's important to know that this organization started as a grassroots organization. So I always like to say that if you know one NAMI, you know one NAMI, right? Because you know what happens. When things unfold from a grassroots level, it's very much shaped by how it starts and what happens along the way, et cetera. So while there is a national organization that is wonderful, and they are kind of like our leaders in the field, and they are out there doing all kinds of wonderful work and providing us who are in the field with lots of resources, with some, you know, prepared classes, et cetera, that we can offer to the community that a volunteer could just kind of pick up and teach and present. We are still, like, each our own organization. And so, like, our NAMI Mercer, which is kind of close to all of you, even though you're not really in Mercer County, you're right on the edge of it, so you're welcome to come on over and participate in our programs and in our groups, et cetera. We are all very different. We're our own 501c3. We have our own governing board. We have to raise our own money, all that sort of thing. So you have a very different, you know, like different NAMIs around, because people will sometimes think, like, well, how come NAMI Mercer does this, NAMI Bucks does that, NAMI Ocean County does this? You know, like, what's all the differences? Well, it's because of this kind of grassroots organization that we are. So I like to begin by talking a little bit about what it is that sets NAMI apart, because you all know there's lots of clinical services. When people are looking for treatment services, right, there's like sort of a cocktail of things that needs to happen, right? Like people need therapy, perhaps. They need to talk to somebody. They need to sort through what's going on in their lives. Perhaps they need medication to stabilize, to help to stabilize them if they're dealing with terrible, you know, mood swings kinds of things, or they're having sort of delusional things happening. There's chemical imbalances in the brain and the body. So there's lots of different things that need to happen to take care of someone in terms of treatment. We are not a provider of clinical services, so that's really important to understand from the outset. We don't do that. We're not therapists, social workers, case managers. That's not what NAMI does. What NAMI does is NAMI builds a community of support, right? And that it can be families helping other families. It can be peers helping peers. We are being present within the community and offering education and support services to the wider community. So that's important to know. So what is it that sets us apart? I like to say the first thing is it's a lived experience leadership model, which is really pretty profound, because when people are talking to you, they get it, right? Like, so if we're offering a class for family members, it's taught by family members who themselves have been down that path. They get it. They understand, right? Whenever we do our support groups, they are peer-led, which means if it's a support group for folks that are struggling with depression or with anxiety, that is someone who has been on that journey. They get it, right? So they are speaking from their own personal lived experience. And I think that's just a very profound kind of thing. It means a lot to people to know that someone really does understand what they're going through. It is a community of shared experience. You know, I feel very, very fortunate to work for this organization because one of the things that I realized was that when people struggle, when they have had to really deal with very, very difficult things in their lives, many times it carves out a place in them for the kind of empathy and compassion that you wouldn't know otherwise, right? It kind of can go either way, I guess. But for many people, it is about that. And so there's a deep level of like care and compassion and empathy. And so I feel very fortunate to be part of that community because it's just a unique and wonderful group to be part of, right? Very much like a faith community. We have that grassroots origin, which I shared with you. We are part of an alliance, which means we kind of voluntarily choose to kind of hang together, right, across the country and, you know, support and share resources and all that sort of thing. I believe that we represent people within the NAMI community, extraordinary resilience, and I like to say post-trauma growth. You know, a lot of times we think about resilience, and that's kind of like getting back to where you were, right? We think like you want to, you know, like if you've kind of had a downward, you know, trajectory that somehow you want to bounce back to where you were. But the reality is that many times people that go through very, very difficult situations and struggles with their mental health, they not only get back to where they were before, but they can exceed that. There can be post-trauma growth, actually, that people can actually take the experience that they've had and use it not just for their own benefit, but then to benefit others, right? And so there's a great deal of hope in that perspective, right? And so I think helping people to recognize that that's true can be really valuable. We have what we call radical inclusivity. Everybody belongs. Everybody's welcome. We're not sorting out. We're not saying, hey, if you're this way, we'll accept you, but if you're that way, no way, right? I have a person on my board who's always saying that, you know, in these times where we're so politically divided, you know, he'll say to me, you know, we got to be really careful because we want to make this a place where everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter if you're left or you're right or whatever you are, right? You're welcome here because we all have mental health. It's not something that discriminates based on anything, based on your political views, based on your socioeconomic status, nothing. We all have to deal with that. And then our programs, all of our programs and services are offered at no cost because we don't want that to be a barrier to participation, right? So that means we rely entirely on philanthropic giving, and I don't need to give that whole pitch, but that's the reality so that anyone can come to any of our support groups, any of our educational programs, and we don't charge for them. And when we go out to the community and do programs, we don't charge for them. We'll sometimes say to people, hey, you can give us a donation, but we don't charge for those things. And part of that's because we recognize that when someone has a mental health challenge, it can very much disrupt their educational pursuits, their ability to hold down a full-time job, like all those sorts of things. So they don't really have the resources to be able to pay for a lot of things. And then families are often very financially strapped trying to get the right kind of treatment for someone. It's not inexpensive. And while we talk a lot about parity and, you know, insurance companies being supposed to pay for, like, you know, mental health treatment and that, it's not so easy. It's a real struggle. It can be very, very difficult. So that's a really important thing that sets us apart. So I want to tell you a little bit about the specific services that we offer because they are also available to you. So you can utilize these services if you wish. So NAMI Mercer has a helpline. And that helpline is not a crisis hotline. If you're looking for a crisis hotline, that's, you dial 988, right? And you can get, that's like the suicide, you know, prevention lifeline, if you will, now. But we are a warm line, and two things happen. You get a compassionate ear who will listen to you and kind of try to understand what it is that you're going through, what you're searching for, what you need. And then it's also a resource hub. So we don't make referrals. Like if somebody calls and says, hey, I need a psychiatrist who accepts Medicare, I'm not going to tell you, you should go to Dr. Jones. But we will point you in the direction of and help you to figure out, how can I sort through this? How can I figure out who I should see as a professional? Like where can I go? How do I put in those filters? Sometimes people don't even know that, like, hey, you know what, you could call your insurance company, or you could go on your insurance company's website and sort through who are the people who are considered like in network. And you can sort by geographic area, and you can sort by specialties. I'm a very visual person, and I like to see people's faces. So like on the Psychology Today website, a lot of professionals like upload both a picture and, a little blurb about who they are and what their specialties are, that sort of thing. I find that very useful because I need to see what somebody looks like. I don't know why, I just do. And again, those are not exhaustive places. Like sometimes you can work with your insurance company to pay somebody else, like out of network, at least a portion of what those charges are. And Psychology Today is only going to list the people that agree to be listed on their site. So none of these are exhaustive, but it helps to point people in the direction of what it is they're looking for. Sometimes families call us and they're looking for an attorney because their loved one has had some sort of psychotic break and has been picked up by the police, right? And so now they're in the county jail and they're like, oh, we don't know what to do. Like what should we do next, And they don't have their medication. So now they're decompensating, right? Like it's really a downward spiral. So it's just getting you in the right kind of lane and direction to get to the resources that you need. That's the number there. 609-799-8994, extension 17. It's also on our website if you need to look for it. If we can't help you because we don't know your area or something like that, we will point you in the right direction, right? We will get you to somebody who can. Can you flip that slide? Along with Helpline, we have something that we call Helpline Plus, which basically a good friend and member of our community kind of coined that term for it, because what I was just describing to you, sometimes people need like a little extra layer of help to navigate the system, like they really do. Like we've had people who have called and said that they wanted to, their loved one is in Trenton Psychiatric Hospital and they can't see them, they can't connect to them, they're not talking to them, they don't know what's going on. What should we do next, right? And so sometimes someone from within our community who's been down that path, again, with that lived experience, they know that you need to call there and request a family meeting, right? And that if you're not getting that, you just need to keep pushing the button until you do, right? And so we will assign someone, we will ask someone to be like that companion, to walk alongside someone and help them really get at the resources that they need. We have even helped people find loved ones. Look, when somebody has some sort of psychotic break, sometimes they up and leave town, right? Like they go to Atlanta, Georgia or someplace. And you're back here, a family member going like, well, I don't know what happened to them. Like they were, they weren't in a good place when they left here. And I know they're there somewhere, but I don't know where. And I'm really worried about them. And, they're probably on the streets somewhere. Are they alive? Are they dead? Like, what should we do? And we've been able to also like leverage that power of that NAMI network. So had somebody like call NAMI Atlanta and say, hey, we're looking for this person. Any chance that you can check around and see if you can find them? And we've actually been successful in kind of locating loved ones who were somewhere in treatment elsewhere in the country, right? So this is a really powerful kind of resource, again, that is available to people. We are launching what we're calling a family match program, where somebody will be able to like sort of recruit people, if you will, who want to be able to do that for somebody else. And at the same time, we also accept volunteers to be on the helpline. And I'll say a little word about that, just a side word, that, when I first started at NAMI Mercer 9 years ago, I pulled into the parking lot where the office was, and there were 2 fire trucks sitting in the parking lot, and my colleague was outside on her cell phone because a ballast in the building had like sparked out and caused a fire. And so it wasn't like as if everything burned down, but there was a lot of smoke damage and water damage and all that kind of stuff, right? So my very first day, we went to Starbucks and we were sitting there on our computers, right, and trying to figure out what we were going to do next. And it became very clear we needed like temporary office space, which we found. And then we realized that it was really, really hard to be able to get our work done, because we had to like move servers from like this old office over to this new space and like trying to transfer phone numbers. And I was like, oh, this is not good. So what we did at that point in time was decided that we needed to get ourselves into a position where everything was remote accessible. So we moved to like Microsoft Online, and we took QuickBooks and put it online. We got an online database. We dispensed with the servers, no more servers, went to a voice over internet phone system, so everything was accessible from home. And I'm telling you all that because what really happened then when COVID hit was we shut our office down on Friday, and on Monday morning we were up and operating, because that had happened in response to an earlier emergency. And so this helpline, it's not available 24/7, because again, it's a warm line. But it is available like from, let's say, 9 until like 4:30 every day during the week. But what's really cool about it is somebody can volunteer and they don't have to come into the office. They can volunteer from home to answer those calls. And I guess I'm saying that because I'm making a pitch. Like if anybody's looking for like an additional volunteer activity besides what you do at the church, you could certainly assist with something like this. You want to flip that? Okay, so these are basically all of the different programs and services that we have to offer that are available to you and or to a loved one. So under we like to divide sort of like what we understand our impact to be into kind of like 3 categories, right? And the first of those is families. Like, what is it that we do for families? Well, we have a class that is called Family to Family. This is a NAMI national signature program, so it's been well-researched, well-funded, put together, like evidence-based, all that sort of thing. And as I mentioned to you before, someone who's a family member who has gone through this whole mental health journey with someone takes that class, and then they're trained to become a presenter, and then they can offer the class. It's always taught by 2 people. Sometimes it's a husband-wife team, which is kind of cool. Sometimes it's not. But that course goes on for 8 weeks. It is, right now the ones that we're offering are in person. We have sometimes done it as in a hybrid version. But I left a brochure over there, like a little flyer, in case you would be interested. There's one that just started this past week at our office in Mercer County. And then we also have one that's coming up that might be of interest that's at the Presbyterian Church in Lawrenceville, if you're familiar. They're going to host it at their church, but we're inviting other churches, anybody in the community who would want to attend. And that one starts on October the 8th. So just be aware that that's a resource. That 8-week program is just packed with information that people need to know about different mental health conditions, like what are kind of some treatment options, et cetera. It's also building a network of support, because what happens is if you're in that class, and when we go around the room at the beginning and people are introducing themselves, it's an opportunity for people to hear another family story a little bit and to figure out like, oh, like that's something that we've experienced too. So it does build community. It also builds sort of a network of like, oh, we never thought to try that, So it's very valuable on both of those fronts, both building the supportive community and on providing really important information, because there's a lot that we don't know, and a lot of times we don't even know what we don't know, right? So it does provide that kind of, but it's a commitment. It's an 8-week commitment, right? The other thing that we offer is family support groups. And those groups are, like as you would imagine, it's a family support group. People come together and they talk about what they're going through, what they've been doing, what's working, what's not working, where their frustrations are, where they've had success, how hopeful they might be for a loved one who's finally like on the path to recovery. And those family support groups, we are so fortunate at our NAMI. We partner with Oaks Integrated Care, which does provide clinical services, and they have these people that are trained family specialists, and so those specialists lead those support groups, right? There are general support groups. There's one on Monday night, every Monday night, and it is online, so someone could certainly participate. The Tuesday night group is both in person and online, and then they do a couple of specialty groups through the course of the month. So there might be one for families who are dealing with someone who has schizophrenia or someone who has a mood disorder. So it's very specialized in terms of what it does. Those are for family members, caregivers, close friends, somebody that's in a supportive network for someone that has a mental health condition. And they are for people who are adults, like so over the age of 18, right? We also have a support group that's called Just Parents. That's for parents, caregivers of kids who are under the age of 24 for youth. So that's what we do for families. For peers, we have a number of different kinds of support groups. Connection is just a general support group. It meets twice a month. It is hybrid, so it's both online and in person. We have, then a few years back, we discovered that, people were really looking for, wanting to be with people that really kind of get their specific diagnosis and can really understand what they're going through very concretely. And so we launched a bunch of affinity support groups, we call them. So there's one for depression. It's called the Empathy Network. It meets only in person at our office. It meets weekly. Mending Mindsets meets twice a month. It's a virtual group, so it's only online. It's for those that are dealing with anxiety. Hearing Voices is for people that have unusual sensory perceptions as part of their mental health diagnosis. So typically it's someone who's dealing with schizophrenia, but it could be somebody that has some other kind of psychotic sort of effects, as part of their symptoms. That meets only in person. We have a social support group. You were talking about game night, right? We have a couple of social support groups that their only purpose is to reduce the social isolation that a lot of times people feel when they're struggling with a mental health condition, particularly if it's serious. And so the goals of those two groups, Becoming Friends and Just Friends, is just to get people together to do fun activities and to just enjoy something with one another. We can take that for granted. And once a month, we actually fund the activities. So we might, obviously we can't do really expensive things, but we'll send them to the Mercer County Theater, the College Theater, or they'll go to a movie, or they'll go bowling, or something like that. And so and then they might do other activities during the month that they're footing the bill for themselves. Weight Does Not Equal Worth is a group that was started by a couple of our interns, and they host that at the College of New Jersey specifically. WOW, Working on Wellness, and if any of you are working for a company that might be interested in this, you could reach out to me. WOW is Working on Wellness. It's a workplace mental health initiative. I have two rock star facilitators, women that were themselves corporate executives. One of them is an international corporate coach. And what they do is they set this up as like a 6-week kind of support group, and the corporate partner that we've worked with very closely has done this during the workday as like a benefit for their employees, right? So that people could log on for this 1-hour support group, and it's just over 6 weeks. And what it does is they talk about things like burnout, like in the workplace, or, just finding support, all kinds of different topics. And then at the end of that, they've kind of established, you kind of know who you could go to in your workplace, who's sort of an ally for you, et cetera. So that's been very, very good. And actually, the WOW program, we started it with this corporate partner when they were just based in New Jersey, and then they merged and they went across the country. And so I'm very excited to tell you that because it's all done online, we've had people that have been part of that group from Texas and Florida and California, and it was just kind of a cool thing to see unfold, and they love it. This corporation has come back to us repeatedly to offer this group. And then Healing Hearts is coming up. That is a hybrid program, and it's for people who have survived suicide loss. So again, if anyone is interested, if you went to our website, you could potentially participate in that group. Or if you know someone who would benefit from that, it would be valuable to let them know that that's available. Again, 6-week, time limited, support group to kind of deal with all of those emotions that are part of coping with the loss of a loved one to suicide. And then lastly, we bucket things into what we call collaborations for building community. And so we do a lot of community education where we'll go out, and we shifted what we do in community education. Once upon a time, we used to all get together and sit down and go like, hey, let's come up with what are the things that we think the community needs to know about, and then we're going to run a program on that, right? And over time, what was happening was we ended up with like 3 people or 5 people, and I was kind of like, hey, it's good to help even one person, but we're putting a lot of time and effort into these kinds of community education programs, and then we're just not getting the return on that. So what we started to do was we realized that people were calling us and going like, hey, can you come talk about mental health and community disasters, or can you come talk about mental health and this or that? And so we shifted our focus and we started saying what we're going to do is we are going to respond to what people are asking us to do, and we're going to put our time and effort into preparing those customized presentations and going out and offering those instead. So that's what we do. So if you need something, let me know. And then Harvest of Hope is our annual wellness conference. We offer this every year as a gift to the community. It is free of charge. We have amazing keynote presenters. It's going to be next Saturday. So we're actually on a wait list right now. But if you wanted to come, you could always, go on the website, register, get your name on the wait list form, because inevitably there will be people who will be canceling, and then we move people over from the wait list. So right now we're like even. We had like 10 cancellations so far and 10 people that we were able to move over. So if you really, really want to come to it, you could go and add your name to that wait list, and we'll let you know if we can get you in. Elizabeth Vargas is going to be our keynote speaker. She will not be with us in person. We will be bringing her in on the live screen. We have somebody on the stage who's interviewing her. There's live audience Q&A with her. So it's a very cool sort of process, I guess you could say. And she is a person, you probably know that name, journalist, has dealt with both addiction and her own mental health, anxiety, et cetera. And so she will be speaking, about her own story, et cetera. And then there's also workshops, and there's another thing that we call Compelling Conversations, which is a program that we will bring out to the community, but we also offer it at the conference. And what we do with Compelling Conversations is we have people that we call communicators who, again, have been on this mental health journey as a caregiver or as the individual themselves, and they kind of learn how to share their story, but they also learn to do, it's like speed dating, right? Like you get 2 minutes, right, to tell a very small group of people, like 4 or 5 people in the little group, a little bit about yourself, right, and what your story's been. And then the next 25 minutes is spent in conversation with that group. So it's an intimate, small group setting where, difficult questions can be asked and answered, and then you move on to like somebody else. And so we do offer that also as part of the conference. And then we recently did something that we called Collaboration for Caring Communities, an initiative that we got a grant for. And basically what we did was we were looking at Trenton, urban area, right? We all know that there's great need in those urban areas and where there are communities of color, et cetera. And we were like, but what happens is sometimes we think to ourselves, okay, we know what you need, and we could be right, okay, but that's not enough. What we said was we wanted to bring people to the table, influencers, pastors, people from within those communities, to tell us both what they need, but also like how we could help, so that we're not just thinking we know what to do or how to help, but that we're actually asking them to provide us with that information. And then phase 2 of that will be trying to identify leaders from within those communities who can help to deliver that service, so that it's not us like going in to do that, but rather identifying and raising up leaders from within those communities. And then we partner with all kinds of other organizations across the community, churches, we partner with Mercer County. We do, one of the things, I don't know if I have that on there, but we do something that's called CIT training. Are you familiar at all with that? It's crisis intervention training for law enforcement, right? Because a lot of times what happens is law enforcement gets called out, and many, many times it's a mental health crisis, right? But if they either don't know that or they just are doing what they do, right? To, sirens blaring and lights on and they're coming in there, that could really escalate the situation with someone who's in the midst of a mental health crisis. So the goal of CIT training is to help build bridges between mental health professionals and law enforcement so that there is a better response. And you might be interested to know here in New Jersey, there's, it's like very much a thing right now, right? Like there's all kinds of sort of programs popping up. But the Attorney General of New Jersey asked for, he kind of launched or put out there like a program that he wants to happen across the state, which is called Arrive Together. And the goal is to make sure that when someone's in a mental health crisis, that a mental health clinician or peer or somebody goes with the police to that crisis situation so that there's both sort of perspectives there to help to de-escalate and to see if there's a way to do a better job of responding in those situations. So we do that CIT training both in the fall and in the spring, so 2 a year. We have one coming up in November, and there will be, this time we're doing twice as many. There will be 40 law enforcement officers there with 20 mental health professionals. And it's a 40-hour training. It's an entire week. It's Monday through Friday. So it's very intense, and it's really very valuable. I did leave over there on the table like a little card that's kind of green and blue. And basically that little card is something we, NAMI Mercer, sometimes gives out to the community to say to folks, here's what to do. If your loved one's having a mental health crisis, they've got a knife or whatever's going on, right? And you're going to call 911 because this is very serious. You need to know, you person need to know that you can ask for a CIT trained officer, that you should tell the dispatcher that it's a mental health emergency. There are things that sometimes we think somebody else knows and they don't, right? But if we could provide that information to them up front, it could change what's going to happen further on down the road. So we try to distribute that to let the community know what they should do with regard to that. And then we're helping to train law enforcement and mental health professionals. We are very fortunate in Mercer County. I don't know what's true here, but we have the Crisis Screening Center is attached to Capitol Health. And so for many, many years, we've actually, police and that Crisis Screening Center have worked in tandem with one another. So we kind of got a little bit of a leg up, I guess, on this whole concept. And it actually is quite effective when it works well. And you always have to make sure you get the right people there. That's a crapshoot. But anyway, so, and then lastly, I just want to talk about our volunteers and interns. We're very much a volunteer-driven organization. And so, we have a little tiny paid staff of 3 people, myself being one of them. And then we rely on hundreds of volunteers to help us to do what we do. They're the facilitators, the teachers, the educators, the administrative support in the office. I said it's the first time I've ever worked for a place where I go into the office and some days, and there's 10 or 12 people in the office, right? Busy little beavers, running around doing stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, this is so unusual because there's just the 3 of us that are actually being paid to do this. But people are very generous with their time. And again, as I said, if you've been through this, you have a different kind of level of understanding and feeling for how important and valuable being there for people can be. And so we have a very vibrant sort of volunteer program, always welcoming volunteers, always looking for volunteers. And then we do a very robust internship program. So if you have a young person who's studying public health, for example, or sometimes the counseling works because some psychology professors see us as a valuable experience for people that are in the field. Others really want people to have clinical experience, so it just depends. But we actually host 30 interns a year. We host 10 a term, 10 in the summer, 10 in the spring, 10 in the fall. And they are amazing. And you will see some of their work over there on the table because they create these things that we call mental health toolkits. And so they work on a topic that is of importance to them. They direct it towards a community that they think needs to have this information. And it's supposed to be practical tips and tools that can be used. It's supposed to be user-friendly, attractive-looking. So samples of some of those toolkits are over there, but there's a lot of them. And actually, there's also a little postcard that has a QR code on it where somebody could take that QR code, go to our website, and look through all the toolkits that we have right now. And actually the ones that are up there are just the ones that are currently approved, because yours truly is still looking at the ones from summer to get them up there. So, so anyway, it's a good resource, again, if you're looking for something and you just want a quick kind of like, let me just have a little look at this, like what can we do to help if our kid has school anxiety? Or what can we do to address ADHD, because my husband was just diagnosed with it. Not my husband, but I'm just saying. Maybe he does have ADHD, I don't know. But at any rate, those are over there as well. So that's basically it. I was just asked to kind of give you an understanding of who NAMI Mercer is and what we have to offer you. Are there any questions? Is there anything that anybody would like to ask about mental health in general, or about, NAMI Mercer? I'm happy to respond to anything that you might have. Yes.
Managing body for NAMI?
So the national organization would be like, they're like our branding. I always say we're like a franchise organization. Think of it that way, right? They're kind of like the branding organization. And so they do have like all these signature programs that they put together. So for example, oh, I forgot to mention our Next Gen initiatives. Like we do a lot of youth-based programs. That's what made me think of it. So like, for example, they put together a program that they called Ending the Silence, right? They created the PowerPoint. They put videos into it. And then a part of it is a young adult shares their story, right? So we, as an affiliate, have access to those resources. Like I could take that Ending the Silence program, train a young person for how to share their story. I train to do the PowerPoint presentation, or another adult could do that, another NAMI leader or volunteer. And then we're prepared, we could go out to the schools and offer that program, right? And so that's kind of like the organizing body, but the thing that it is like a franchise, because we're still responsible to kind of make our own little chapter vibrant and useful to the local community, to do what we can. And again, a lot of those things depend on what kind of resources do you have at your disposal, people-wise, money-wise, et cetera. So that's kind of how that works. And then what's cool about the way we operate is, although we can have access to all those signature programs, like Connection is a signature program, Family to Family was a signature program, Ending the Silence is a signature program from the national office, we're also allowed to do our own stuff. That's why all those different things that I said to you are things that we just kind of put together ourselves. Or for example, with the youth in the schools, and again, if any of you are connected to your school through your parent association, whatever, we will come to you. Like I don't care that you're not in Mercer County, we would come down and do it for your school. We put together a little program that we called Let's Talk Mind Matters, because I felt like I was going into high schools, right, and delivering this PowerPoint presentation, and the kids were like, deer in headlights, you know how that goes, or looking on their phones, and I was like, okay, this is like I'm not reaching them. And so we kind of developed our own program where we'll work with the counselor in the school and ask them to identify like 2 student moderators, right? And then the counselor and the moderators, or the teacher and the moderators, principal and the moderators, whatever, will ask the kids, solicit the kids anonymously to submit the questions that they would like to have asked about mental health. And then we come in as a team, myself, a young adult, and a therapist or a caseworker, somebody who's a clinician in the field. And then the 3 of us kind of sit down with the moderators, and it's like a talk show, and the moderators pose those questions to us. And they're the questions that the kids were able to submit anonymously prior to this, because just like what happens here, a lot of times, you're very brave. Like you say, does anybody have any questions? And people are sitting there and they have questions, but they're like, I don't know. I don't know what people will think about me if I ask that question. So the same thing's true of the kids. So this other program is something that, like, if a school would call me and say, what do you want to do? I would offer them either of those things. That was a long answer to your question. Any other questions?
You have no clinicians.
No clinicians. No clinicians. And it's funny that you asked that question, because interestingly enough, there is a NAMI, like somewhere out west, I think it was Arizona or whatever, that was actually doing like fee-for-service with Medicare and had like clinicians on staff. I don't really know how they were doing that, but they were doing that. So, yeah. Yes.
I just want to say thank you. It's a wonderful organization. My mother was bipolar, and you helped me 30 years ago.
That's really good to know. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this is a story over and over and over again. I like that family-to-family class I was telling you about. We offer that in the spring and the fall every year, and we fill it every time, right? Like 10 to 12 people, 15 family members, 17 family members. I'm like, how, that tells you how significant the need is and how kind of universal it is. I mean, like if we stop and think about it, and I'm not going to ask you, but if I were to ask for a show of hands, I'll bet you every single person in here knows somebody, has somebody in their family, is dealing with this in one way or another. It just is very, very universal. I have a nephew that's struggling very much with social anxiety and all kinds of stuff. He showed up at my son's wedding a couple weeks ago, and it's the first time that he's done anything, like except he goes to like work and back and forth to work and comes home. But it's the first time he's done anything like that, literally in probably 8 or 9 years. And I talked to him there at that event, and he said to me, Aunt Janet, it's just so hard. And my heart was just bleeding for him, right? And I'm in the field trying to tell him, like I'm sending him stuff going like, hey, you know, like you could do this, you could do that, like maybe you should try this. But it's just, it's a burden. It's really.
Feel that way. You don't understand it. It's like you don't have a wound that you can physically see. The person can appear completely normal, and it's just something that invades a family's life.
It's 100% true. And I think the other thing that's true is, look, whenever somebody in our community has cancer or, I don't know, breaks a leg, whatever it might be, right? Everybody rallies around, right? Like they create, like, we're going to deliver meals, we're going to do, we're going to do stuff, right? Like that's how we respond to it because it's very visible, it's very clear, we can see it. Mental illness is like an invisible kind of thing, right?
Yes. Nobody wants to talk about it. 30 years ago when my mother had her crisis, it was, you didn't talk about it. It was, you were shamed,
Absolutely, 100%. Because there was a blame associated with it, right? Like somebody did something wrong here, and that's why this person is like this, right? Except that's not the case. Sometimes it has nothing to do with anything at all. There's a great movie, well, I don't know if I'd call it great. I thought it was pretty great. It's called The Sun. I don't know if you happen to see that ever. But it's on Netflix, and Anthony Hopkins has a tiny little cameo in it. I forget who the guy is that plays the dad. But it's the story of this young boy who's dealing with his own mental health challenges. It could be disturbing, I would say, but it's very accurate in terms of just the kid kind of at some point looking at his dad and going, like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Like, I can't. This is how I feel. And the dad's like, well, did something happen at school? Like, no. Like, he's just like, I'm really sad. Like, I'm just not interested in anything. I don't care about anything anymore. Like, it's just, sometimes it just comes on. Like, there's no reason, like, that one can identify. And so that makes it also very, very difficult because we don't understand it. We don't understand where it came from. We don't understand what to do to make it better. And then sometimes the person themselves doesn't have the recognition that there is anything wrong with them, right? And so that further complicates it. There's actually a name for that. But that makes it really, really challenging. And how do you get, like, we get calls all the time on the helpline from family members going, I feel so helpless, right? Like, I don't know what to do. My son won't take his medication. He's bipolar, this or that has happened, and they'll be saying, like, what can we do? How can I get him to take his medication? And the reality is, the answer is, like, you can't, right? So here's the thing. What can you do for you? How can you find the kind of support that you need for yourself and also maybe make yourself aware of some other efforts you can take or things that you might be able to do that may or may not work, because ultimately that person is sort of going to make their decisions. The other thing that I do want to mention to you, because if you have someone in your family or you know someone who's really struggling, there is something in New Jersey called like a psychiatric advance directive. And basically, it is very similar to what you think of as a regular medical advance directive, right? somebody can complete this form, and it's a legal document where they say, like, you know, because in their better moments, when they are very coherent and know what they're doing, they could say, you know, if something happens to me, this is who I want to be making these decisions for me. And by the way, in addition to them making those decisions for me, you, professional, are allowed to talk to them. Because that's a critical thing, right? Somebody's over the age of 18, they're considered an adult. They are not obligated, the professionals that are working with them, in fact, are prohibited from sharing with you important information. And that is so frustrating for family members and parents, etc. So if you have a loved one who's struggling, when they're in a good place, if you can get them to complete one of those, it can be very, very helpful in terms of how they're going to receive treatment and what's going to happen further down the line. Somebody back there had a question.
Support groups can kids below the age of 18 be in those support groups, or would that fall into the just parents category where parents would get information because the kids are under 20?
Yeah, those family groups are just for adults, families and caregivers, right? And the family support group is for parents and caregivers of people who are dealing with a mental health condition who are over the age of 18. And the just parents one is for those under the age of 18. Yeah, or under the age of 24, I'm sorry. So if you're between 18 and 24, you could go to either. Now, those family support groups, what I will say about this is because they're run by intensive family support services, it could happen that if you logged on to one of those family support groups, they would say, okay, wait a minute, like you're not really in Mercer County, so we can't like service you directly. They might have to point you in the direction of intensive family support services for your county. The Just Parents one, though, is open to everybody because that's our program. It's not under Oaks Integrated Care, so there's no constraints there. Okay, all right, very good. No, just take care of each other. Take care of your own mental health. And don't be afraid to talk about it because that's the thing that really matters. When we begin to talk about things, they're no longer bigger than life and we can manage them. So really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet, for making us aware of all of those local resources. Will you stick around for a few minutes in case people want to come up and approach you with questions? Okay. So if you have questions that didn't get answered or you want more information about any of the specific things that she shared in this session, just come up at the end of class. Great. Okay. Yeah, so there's a table of resources here as well, so you can peruse it. It will be out for a while, so you can come and check that out. Next week, come back again. We have the second installment in this Mental Health Matters class, and we're going to be hosting Reverend Miriam Diephouse McMilan, who is an ordained PCUSA minister. She's a chaplain at the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, and she's going to be sharing a little bit more about kind of the biblical basis for caring about mental health. Why should we in particular care as Christians, as people motivated by our faith in Jesus? So come back next week to learn about that. And now we're going to head over to worship. We have some awesome guests, some friends from Malawi who are going to be singing and providing some music in our worship today, and an amazing guest preacher. So we're excited to worship together at 11. See you there.